petite ancienne colonie française. Je vais donc me replier sur l'anglais quelques minutes. Now, the first thing I should mention is that my day job at the moment is as president of the International Development Research Center. It's a Crown corporation of the federal government. It's a junior partner within Canada's International Aid Program. And for the last 42 years, we've been funding development research in the developing world. The single country where we have invested most, probably about $500 million in today's money, would be India. And why is that? Because India is the ultimate laboratory for development, both in terms of successes and in terms of failures. It's very difficult to study development without sooner or later looking very closely at India. IDRC has about 150 active projects in India at the moment, ranging from quite small ones that individuals are carrying forward to providing core money to 9 of India's top think tanks so that they can improve themselves by paying better salaries, by being more ambitious. And that we do, the think tank part of it, in partnership with 4 other funders of development research, the Gates Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, both of them quite large, the British Development Ministry, and the Dutch Development Program. So India's part of my daily life in my day job, as I was saying, as well as being part of my research life in a much narrower way. In the world outlook and foreign policy of a country, what really matters, if one is grossly to simplify? I think what matters is history, geography, and capability. Luxembourg has great geography, although not much of it. It's in the middle of a very prosperous continent, but it doesn't have much capability. So it's not a huge international force. India has terrific real estate, albeit in a difficult neighborhood. It has a glorious history, and it has growing capability. And that's why we're all paying attention to India. So the mix of history, geography, and capability in the case of India is worth spending perhaps a few minutes on. It's usual for politicians and others when they're speaking in Canada about India to stress what we have in common. And we do have a lot in common. We have democracy in common. We have the Westminster parliamentary system. Many of us have the English language in common. So there's quite a bit we have in common, but actually that could lead us to delude ourselves that we are like each other. Actually, we're not like each other, and our outlook on the world is actually quite different. And I'll give you one example. If you're a Canadian of European extraction, empire, be it French Empire or English Empire, strikes us as having made a good contribution to Canada over time. When you're Indian, you think of empire as a disaster because it was a disaster for India. India is a country that spawned several empires in the past, never for very long, by the way. Usually what we think of as India today was a conglomerate of many smaller polities, sometimes kingdoms, sometimes republics. They took all sorts of forms, but it had a few homegrown empires. It also had, in effect, an imported empire which preceded the Raj, which was the Mughal Empire. It came to India from Afghanistan with quite a lot of influence from Persia. But all of these empires actually adapted themselves to India if they weren't Indian. The Mughal Empire was brilliant at adapting to India. whereas the British decided that India should adapt to Britain and serve British interests above all. So the British Raj was a project of economic exploitation of India, and as such it was tremendously successful for the Brits. For the Indians, it was a disaster, and I'll cite only two sets of figures for you. In the last 20 years, there's been quite a lot of work amongst economists and historians on how economic production globally stacked up over the last 2,000 years, which regions, which polities were contributing the most to global production. And on average, it turns out that China would be producing 25% of global output, with sharp ups and downs. India would be producing anywhere between 17% and 22% of global production. India, let's say writ large, including what we today, of course, think of as Pakistan and Bangladesh, probably also including Sri Lanka, would be producing somewhere between 17 and 22% of global output. When the British came to India, it was producing about 20% of global output. By the time the British left, it was producing less than 2% of global output. That's all you really need to know about the Raj, actually. If you're India, that's what matters. Another way of translating those figures is that while growth in Europe exploded during the 19th century, growth in India in the 19th century was completely flat. Although the population grew, economic output didn't grow at all under the British in India. Completely flat, in fact, for 200 years. And in order for Britain to prosper, Indian industries, notably its textile industries, needed to be destroyed so that Indians would buy British textiles made from often Indian cotton. So from